Good evening. Welcome to the Late Late Show with me, Irish Tommy. Thanks all as usual for joining. And as always, we'll be talking all things West Ham. But as per usual, we're going to check and see who's in the house. Razor, how you doing, my friend? Irish can only be Tim and Newman signing. Moyes probably never heard of him anyway. We'll get into that. We'll see. Maybe, maybe not. Damien, how are you, mate? Good to see you. Thanks for joining. It would be a shame if Declan money being spent on older players, and yes, I can see the thought in that, but surely the director of football can find suitable players that need no betting in. What is that? Cup upgrades. There are numerous players who can get the job done, even if we choose two players, but they will still wouldn't add up to the 50k bidded. Thanks for joining. Jay is in the house as well. Evening, Jay. En-Nesyri, Fernand Broya, great way to spend the funds. The En-Nesyri ship has probably sailed, I think, at this point. I think Moyes is probably over it now. En-Nesyri, he did want to sign him last couple of seasons, I think, but I think it's unlikely now. Borges, I think, is more likely. There's been talk about Borges actually. Just the last 24 hours, he has not gone to the US. Is it the US that Chelsea have gone to for their pre-season? He hasn't gone with them now. I think the official word from Chelsea was that he still has a little work to do to get fully fit. But the inside word is that we are in talks with Chelsea about the possibility of bringing Borges to West Ham. That would not surprise me in the least. I think that's a very credible link. I take a lot of links with a pinch of salt, but this one is very credible. We know the interest is there, has been from Moyes previously. So it would not surprise me in the least if we hear a bit more about this in the coming days. So that'll be an interesting one to keep an eye out for. I like Borges. I liked him at Southampton. He definitely seems to be a Moyes kind of player. I think he's the kind of player Moyes would like. I think he would work in David Moyes' system. Very good player, Borges. I like him. He's young. I think he is talented. Hasn't hit his ceiling yet by any means. I think he'll continue to improve. Obviously, he's been disrupted with injury, knee injury. It was a knee. I think it was maybe knee ligaments. And obviously, we'll have to be careful on that one. Once they go once, they can be troublesome. So we'll have to wait and see what happens there. But it's very credible. Hammers Mikey, not messing about. Moyes out. Tell us what you really feel, Mikey. Damien Byfield again. Vogue Fofana got injured. Oh, is that true? Is Fofana injured? Hammers Mikey must have chucked me out the house at a big Bernice is sitting in Clifford's Park in Putnam Morgans and watching missing out on my tablet. You know what? Bloody love it. Fucking hell, Mikey, you're having a day. Jesus, oh sorry, bro. You know you don't have to share absolutely everything, Mikey. If you don't want to, it's okay. Matt Rain in the house. Evening, mate. How you doing? Ginge is in the house. Not that Ginge. It'd be amazing if that Ginge was in. How you doing, mate? Dave Luxton is in. Good to see you, mate. How are you? Power and the Glory. Evening, how are you? John Dixon is in. Good to see you, mate. Paul Evans in there. The old mucker, Peter Chelmsford, the ever-reliable Peter Chelmsford. Borges has been overhyped by West Ham fans because he played well against us. He only scored 6 goals in 32 games for Southampton. Yeah, but as the saying goes, Peter, I think he was like 19. So, you know, we maybe cut him a little slack as a 19-year-old on not scoring a bag full of goals. I just liked what I saw from him. The kind of player he is. I just like the cut of his jib, as we say over here. And I think there are more goals in him than that once he becomes, I think, an established player for a team. But, I mean, it would also depend on the money. Chelsea tend to like to sell high. They tend to ask for quite a lot of money for their players. So we'll wait and see on that one. I think he'd be a good signing if the money is right. But let's see what happens with it. Even Tommy Yono, Hammers Mikey back in. Cyber Leader, how you doing? Good to see you. Welcome. Also got Paul Evans in the house. Agreeing with Peter on that one. Cyber, we said hello. And Andy Imp. For a second, I thought it was Andy Impey. I was thinking, geez, we've got two former Hammers in the chat, Ginge and Andy Impey. But am I right? I don't know if any of you remember this, but wasn't there like massive friction at West Ham when Redknapp was in charge? Wasn't it one of the reasons he left was because Andy Impey was basically sold behind his back, that he didn't want to sell Andy Impey, but the chairman went ahead and sold him against Redknapp's wishes, and I think that was kind of the beginning of the end of that. If I'm remembering correctly, some of you might remember that, or correct me if I'm wrong. Hammer 89, good to see you, mate. Can only imagine these young players have been told that Moyes won't be around long. Can't imagine them wanting to join us, otherwise Moyes won't play them. Moyes' record with younger players and developing players is not good. He doesn't tend to do it. For whatever reason, he just doesn't seem to like really developing players and taking the time to do that. I don't know why. I think a lot of managers enjoy that part of the job, taking a kind of a young raw player and coaching them and molding them into a great player. And for some reason, Moyes just doesn't seem to have that much interest. I know people will say, over in Australia on a pre-season tour, he played youngsters. But I personally wouldn't read too much into that. Moyes has a track record, really, of using these youngsters if and when it suits him, because he wants to rest other players, first-team players. So he'll chuck them in when it suits him to do it. But to me, he's never really doing it with an eye to actually really developing them. So it will be an interesting one, because we have a really, really good crop of youngsters who just look very, very promising. And I worry that they won't be developed or be given any real opportunity to become either first team players or first team squad members. So I'm a bit worried about that. Thankfully, a lot of them are very young. So if Moyes isn't going to be around beyond this season, they will still have a chance, because they'll still be young enough when the next manager comes in, and hopefully he would have more of an eye on developing our best youngsters, because they're showing a lot of promise. Some of the performances we saw from them out in Australia, I think were very encouraging. We didn't even see all of them, out there that could make the breakthrough. So, we didn't see Ollie Scarles out there, for example, who I think is probably very close, especially if we sell Cresswell. I think if we sell Cresswell, I would love to see Ollie Scarles as an understudy to Emerson. Because Ollie Scarles, I think, like Emerson, can play as an orthodox left back, but can also operate as a wing back. And he could learn a lot from Emerson. He was very experienced and has won trophies, and lots of them. And so I'd love to see that. But realistically, it's just not going to happen under David Moyes. I think more or less, I think you'll certainly see Mubama in the first team squad. How much game time he'll get remains to be seen. It probably won't be as much as we'd like. And I think the only other player that might get a little bit of minutes potentially is Potts. Freddie Potts. I think I really liked what I've seen from him, but there's talk that he's going to go out on loan. So I think for next season, again, it may just be Mubama, who's regularly on the bench and who gets a few minutes. So don't read too much into how much time the youngsters got to play out in Australia. It's a false dawn, I'm afraid. You'll be sorely disappointed if you think it's going to be like this going forward, or that they're going to get their chance. I just don't believe that under David Moyes they're going to get that chance. Peter back in. Moyes said he only wants Premier League experienced players, yet supposedly signing youth Man City player with no experience. Yes, I take your point, but I think I think when David Moyes said that, I think it was more a case of bringing players in from foreign leagues to whom the kind of style of play in England is alien. And that the adjustment period, in his eyes, whether you agree with him or not, I'm just talking about what I think David Moyes was getting at, was that it takes them sometimes too long to adjust to the Premier League. That obviously would not particularly be an issue here, because he's come through a youth academy in England, plays in the English style of play, as it were. That's number one. So he'd already kind of know the English game. He's homegrown, despite the fact he's Portuguese. He's homegrown. He counts as a homegrown player, which helps with the quota, which we need to address, by the way. And the other thing is, I don't think Moyes would see him as somebody who would just be thrown straight in the team. I don't think he views him that way, because of his age and inexperience. I think Moyes sees him as potentially a backup to someone like Benrahma, or someone who could potentially play up top if he needed him to. But he would be down in the pecking order a bit. So I think Moyes is bringing him in with a view to augmenting him into the team over time anyway, because he's such a young player. Moyes is not inclined to chuck young players like that in at Premier League level. So I think that's Moyes' thinking on that one. So I don't think it's necessarily a contradiction of what Moyes was saying. I think Moyes is just loath to bring players in from the continent or South America or places like that. I think he wants players who are familiar with the Premier League, or at least with English football. I think he would probably include Championship players in that. Players that, if they were good enough, that they could come up from Championship, like Jared Bowen did, and slot in fairly seamlessly, because English football is English football. Okay, it's a higher level in the Premier League, but they can adjust more quickly from Championship to Premier League if they're good enough, potentially, than they can if they're coming from, say, Italy or somewhere. So Matt Crawley, in. How are you doing, Matt? Good to see you. Ray Burke in as well. Evening, how are you? Steve Dillon, how's the man from the Premier County? All good, all good. Just checking the hurling rule books to see if there's any way that both teams could lose the All-Ireland final on Sunday. Bernard Royce, but Lukaku is looking for a new club. Lukaku is going to AC Milan. So that's basically the end of that one, I'm afraid, but AC Milan are signing him. It's not a done deal, but it looks like that's going to be signed, sealed, and delivered over the next few days. Alison Street is in. Welcome. Good to see you, Alison. How are you? We'll see Lingard and Pyatt as they're starting midfield for the Bournemouth game. Oh, my God. Can you imagine? Yeah, Pyatt was released by Marseille today. He's 36 years old. So, no, that's not going to happen. But he'll probably, unless another French team kind of nips in for him, he might be in yet another player that ends up in Saudi Arabia on ridiculous money. Dave Luxon said, I'm really concerned as to who is in charge of transfers currently. Now, the only Prem club without activity, I still like Alex Scott and Jim Lee, Krez leaving. We're going to unpack that in a little while. So just, I'm going to keep my powder dry, because I'm going to have a couple of guests on this evening very shortly. And we're going to get into all of that stuff. Barry Clark, evening's good. Evening's good. Thank you, mate. Despite the fact I made absolute shit of my back at work last week, and I'm still trying to get it right. But I'm mostly not in pain and discomfort now, which is a good thing. But last week, I was crippled. So I don't really rate James Ward-Prowse. Yeah, it's another thing we will get into, the transfer stuff. I want to see Cresswell until shipped out ASAP. You will probably get your wish. You are an impy. Okay, so same name, just wrong race and age, I imagine. Picture a transfer record of buying and selling is bloody awful. Yep, absolutely dreadful. Hammer and Redknapp left because he called out Terence Brown to a fan magazine, walked in to sign a new contract and was sacked. But wasn't it? Yeah, he called out Terence Brown. I know he had a lot of friction with Terence Brown. He was not happy, but I believe the final straw was Andy Impey being sold behind his back. I'm pretty sure I'm right on that. Chris Jackson, good evening, mate, from Canada. How you doing, mate? Thanks for joining us. Appreciate it. We need signings now. Oh yeah, we need signings. Like in the next week, we should have signings plural. We should really be kind of well into getting our business done this time next week. We knew we were losing Rice, had no replacement in the pipeline. Astonishing. Yeah, we're going to be talking about that too. It's bizarre. Alice Street, Moyes just here for one more season. He does not care about our future just to now. That's why he's looking at old experienced players. Why would he care about our youth? Exactly. I agree completely, Alison. And I'm going to be getting into that too, because this show is going to be all about not just specific players who we would or wouldn't like to see signed or sold. It's also going to be about transfer strategy and how we should be doing it, given that Moyes will very likely not be the West Ham manager next season, might not even be the West Ham manager for the second half of the season, depending on how things are going. So we will be getting into that. Reclect was speaking about Moyes. He doesn't like playing our youth players. That's one of the things I most dislike about him. And he'd be always reactive, never proactive, unfortunately. Richard knows what I want myself and want it now. Hammer 89 saying, personally, I would start Potts and Obama at Bournemouth. I don't know if I'd start them both against Bournemouth. I mean, if Scamacca's still here, I would certainly want to see Scamacca start. In a two up top, if we went Scamacca and Obama, I'd have absolutely no problem with that whatsoever. I don't know if I'd chuck him in right now as our frontline striker, but certainly I'd be using this season to move him in that direction, that he would be the heir apparent to Scamacca or whoever happens to be our frontline striker next season. This should be the season where Mubama really starts to step up and get that experience he needs so that he can be that guy in the future. West Ham coming around says, hi Tom, we're very worried about what is happening with our club at the moment. We're losing a lot of players and backroom staff. This is not good. That's another thing. We have not as yet begun to replace the backroom staff. Moyes only played the kids because so many players were late back to preseason training. Basically, you won't see these kids again until we have a game where it suits Moyes to play them again. He's not interested in developing. Two keepers on the bench guaranteed at Bournemouth. Yeah, that's one of my bugbears. Why have two keepers on the bench when you can have one of these youth players in there? It just, I know I understand that the second keeper is a youth player, but you still should not have two keepers on the bench. It's completely unnecessary. We should have Potts on the bench instead, someone like that. Trinhammer, I feel after the first 6 games we'll be in trouble and Moyes will be gone. It could happen. Absolutely could happen. Barry Clark, I like the look of Dan Chester. Is a really good player who can play a lot of positions, and George Earthy looks a good midfielder and play left to right. Yeah, both of them look very good out in Australia. Very impressed. Youth football different Premier League, obviously, goes without saying. Okay, I'm going to bring in my first guest now because the chat is getting wild and I just can't even keep up with it. But I will come back. I will be putting your comments up on stream. But for now, we better bring this man in before he gets impatient with me. How you doing, Luke?
All time in the world, mate. Thanks for having me on. How you doing, right?
Yeah, doing good now. Doing good. The chat's pretty lively, and I guess all the talk right now is about transfers, transfer strategy, the players we want to see coming and going. And for me, the most interesting part of this is the dynamic at play at West Ham this summer when it comes to transfers. There's the worry, obviously, is that we're not in sync, right? So we've got Tim Stidham. Is it Stidham?
I believe so.
I'm going to call him Stidham. If I'm mispronouncing it, I'm sure over time I'll learn to pronounce it properly. But for ease of conversation, I'll just say Stidham. We've got Tim Stidham in, director of football, essentially. Brilliant at finding young talent. has a great track record. They call him the pearl diver because he's just so good at finding pearls. Um, but then, of course, we have David Moyes, who's the manager, who, at least up until now, has really had the final say on transfers and which players we do or do not sign. He has also had the power of veto, which I believe he still has. From what I hear, he still has the power of veto. Mark Noble is also apparently in the mix, and we know David Sullivan loves sticking his oar in. So at the moment, it's hard to know if there's any kind of symmetry, shall we say, between the four of them in how we go about signing our players, how we identify which players we actually want to put bids in for and try to sign, or which players we decide not to go for. Um, it has the potential to be very messy. Luke, too many cooks spoil the broth and all that. And of course, the other dynamic is that David Moyes is in the last year of his contract. We don't even know if he'll still be West Ham manager 10 games into the season, let alone be there till the end of the season. And so this whole dynamic is all just a little bit strange. And we're already kind of hearing things that are not promising. That David Moyes is being a bit stubborn on the Fofana deal. That Steidham really likes him. I think Mark Noble likes him, but David Moyes is kind of they're trying to convince him. He's a bit I don't know, maybe not, and so this deal is stalling at the moment. Nothing is happening with it. This could get messy, Luke. Are you worried at all about what kind of dynamic is actually running at West Ham at the moment?
At the moment, I'm slightly more worried about the echo that I think I've got coming out of. I think is it your computer or is it mine? Well, it seems to have gone now. That's all right. It doesn't seem to be there anymore, so that's problem solved. I am more concerned, and it's been brought up in the last day or so, that we've known as fans that Rice has been, is going to go, or has, been on the verge of going for at least the last 6 months, if not to a year maybe. And there hasn't been a contingency plan to say, right, when he goes, this player will come in, that player will come in, or even before he gets sold, just have some kind of plan going on. It's difficult with Tim coming in, possibly because, it's going to throw a fox amongst pigeons or chickens, for example, because he's going to have his own ideas and they need to learn how he works and how they can make it work as a group. So there's in my opinion, there's so much going on behind the scenes that we don't know about, and it's quite interesting because I think we've seemed to have gone from being linked to players like Harry Maguire and James Ward-Prowse to suddenly being linked to Man City's best youth player, and then other players, from around Europe or young players, and you can kind of see from the outside which one is a Moyes signing and which one is a Tim Stein signing. And realistically, if we've got Moyes as manager, it would make sense to bring in the players that he wants to work with. It just would. If he's going to stay on for the indefinite future, whether it might be 3 months or if it's longer or shorter or whatever, if you're going to have him as manager, you would go and buy players that he wants to work with. If you don't see him as being a long-term West Ham manager, or you don't trust him, his values, you bring in players he doesn't want to work with, and either he quits or he just becomes stubborn, and we have another terrible start to the season because he doesn't want to work with the players that have been brought in. Last season, if those players were the players that the boys wanted, they're great players. Nearly all the players he brought in on paper were really good players. Now, whether they half those didn't work out because of Moyes' management style or his man management, or he didn't buy them, and there was 1 or 2 that he did and 6 others that he didn't. I don't know, but I am kind of I'm not concerned. I'm past being concerned because it's like I'm quite excited that Tim Stein has come to the club, and we're finally sort of starting to move into the lanes that every other well-run club you know, has got their noodle with them, and you know, they noodle about them, and they go and get a director of football who knows what he's doing, and he can point them in the right direction. But the other side of it is going, well, this is still classic West Ham, because you know the season is only a few weeks away, and we haven't signed one player yet. It's even at a point where you start to go, I wouldn't even mind a free signing, classic David Sullivan, free agent, 32 years old, who's coming to the end of his career, because at least there's some freshness in the squad. There's a fresh face. It's to liven things up. But it is concerning. I'm not concerned that, I just can't work it out. I don't understand it, if you get what I mean.
Yeah, and it's to me, look, again, it just all comes back to David Sullivan. It just really does. This is just more mismanagement of the club. We shouldn't be in this situation. You know, it's like he's falling between two stools. You know, he could have done one of two things. He could have given David Moyes a handshake at the end of the season and says, listen, really appreciate everything you've done. You know, you've done a tremendous job, but things have just kind of not been going well in the Premier League the last 18 months, and we really flirted with relegation. It's not been a good season. Lost 20 games, 1-2 away from home. It's just not working anymore. But we really appreciate everything you've done. And we obviously really appreciate, that you did lead us to the Conference League win. But it's time to kind of part ways, and we need to go in another direction. And then you can bring in your new manager, Tim Stidham, and they can, and you can put structures in place. You can bring the new manager in with the proper structure in place, where Stidham is the technical director, and the manager works for him, right? And you explain to this manager who's coming in, he takes the job on the understanding that, of course, he'll have a relationship with Stidham, and of course he can give input to Tim Stidham about players that he likes, or what positions he really wants to upgrade, and what kind of type of player would work for him and his system, and then Stidham can go and find those players and bring them in. That would have made sense. Or telling David Moyes, look, you've done a brilliant job, I'm very happy. Okay, we haven't been great in the Premier League, but you won us a cup, and I still have belief in you. So we're going to extend your contract. I'll give you a new contract, extend you for 2 years or 1 year or whatever it is, and we're going to keep backing you in the transfer market, try and get you the players you want, and move forward into next season. He hasn't done either of those things. He's fallen between two stools. So he's brought in this director of football, Stidham, and has kept Moyes on a 1-year contract, and has given apparently some power in the transfer market to David Moyes and some to Stidham, or they're trying to run this thing by committee, and frankly, it's a mess.
See, that works if you can both, if two people can work together. It doesn't work if you've got people who are constantly not seeing eye to eye. For me,
I don't imagine Moyes has just given up his say in transfers. I mean, he just, from having complete control, I don't think Moyes would have ever been okay with saying, okay, Tim's signing the players now, and you just crack on. Tim would never, as far as I'm aware, Moyes still has the power of veto and the final say about which players we do or don't sign. And to me, that's just a complete mismatch. Because on the one hand, you're bringing in this guy who has a proven track record of finding talent, young talent. And then you place him in with a manager who's got particularly no interest, really, in young talent that he hasn't heard of from the continent and further afield, and also has the power of veto and the final say in who we do or don't sign. The whole thing to me is, I just, how's that going to fucking work? I mean, James, evening, thanks for joining. I mean, to me, the whole thing is just a bit of a mess.
It's bad, mate. I let Luca go. I let Luke go first.
Luke, it's like nobody's actually in charge in any real way of who does come in.
I understand why he kept in a way. I understand why he kept Moyes on, because to the media, if you suddenly go, we're not sacking, we're letting go or getting rid of the manager who, on paper, has won us our first trophy in over 40 years. The media are going to go, "What are you doing? You can't let this guy go. You know, you should be grateful to him what he's done at West Ham.
Well,
2
fuck the
seasons in Europe,
media.
right?" And listen, but this one hand, media's a big part of football nowadays, whether you like it or not. But the problem with that is that, you know, if keep him on, what's his role going to be? Is he going to have the same sort of power? So when you bring someone who in Tim, who is European renowned and his name is quite highly regarded as, you then got to go, right, as a power struggle here. And to be honest with you, if I'm being completely honest with you, I actually thought Moyes was going to say no, I'm off. I've, I've done my bit. I've won the cup. You know, you've all slagged me off all season. I've just won your first trophy in 43 years. I'm off. And there's a part of me maybe that thinks he got turned down for the Celtic job, and they gave it to Rodgers instead, because realistically, when you've won a club their first trophy in so long, for a team that aren't used to winning trophies, you know, since that time, you're probably not going to go much higher up. You're probably not going to be able to, you know, break the ceiling from that. That is probably as high as Moyes is going to go, and I genuinely think he wanted a Celtic job, but didn't have the balls to fully go, right, I'm leaving West Ham, I'm going to go join Celtic, because they probably went, no, we've got Rodgers instead. And then he thought, right, I've got to stay here now anyway. But this is what I'm saying, this is now, that's probably like a bollocks, to be honest with you, but it's just the only thing I could think of, because this situation we're in now makes you think of why we're in the situation we're in. We've just sold our best player for 100 million, not just like 20 million, 30 million, 100 million, after, you know, stronghold negotiations to get that 100 million, and in the way that we wanted it paid. And there's not a contingency plan to go, right, as soon as his contract is transferred to Arsenal and he's no longer a West Ham player and that money is in the bank, we are going to buy his replacements. We've got XYZ behind the curtain waiting to be revealed. The next day they're revealed. None of that. It's not. It kind of highlights exactly how amateur we can be as a club. And I shouldn't really be surprised, and I'm not to an extent, but at the same time, it's almost laughable to the fact that I think we must be the only Premier League team that hasn't signed anyone yet. I'm sure that must be true. And to be honest with you, as much as this Borges guy from Man City could be a fantastic player, and it could be an absolute gem that Tim Steiden's found, we shouldn't really be relying on Man City's best used player to come in and get everyone feeling a bit more positive and thinking he's going to, you know, light up the Prem next season for us and be the player that can replace Declan Rice or whatever you want to, you know, whatever they're going to say he's going to do. Looks like an absolute gem of a player, absolute bulldozer. But there's no way he should be coming in as the first and almost main signing. Like, you know, they're going to try and paint it as. So he should be the fourth signing out of 7 or whatever it's going to be. And, you know, it's nice to have him along, but there's other players as well that we sign. We're looking forward to seeing them play. But at the moment, it just seems like it's a complete and utter travesty what's happening in the back. And we're waiting for this signing, and we've played more pre-season games than we have signed players. And at the minute, that's where we're going to struggle. So it's ridiculous, to be honest with you. But I'm not surprised at all, unfortunately.
Yeah, what do you think, James, about the dynamic at West Ham now with Tim Steidham there? Moyes still there, still has the power of veto, still ultimately decides who we sign. Mark Noble sticking his oar in as well, apparently. And this, what do you make of this kind of signing by committee? I mean, it all seems a bit bizarre to me.
It's too many cooks, mate. Too many cooks at the end of the day. You've got too many opinions. Like us three could all talk about players and we could all agree or disagree on every single one of them. Do you know what I mean? So I like the younger player that West Ham are going for. That's the sort of idea I want to see. I don't want us to be signing 28, 29-year-olds. I want us to have a long-term plan. It's okay signing these 28, 29-year-olds and, yeah, do it for the next sort of year or two. But when that runs out, then what else you got? Moyes gets benefit of the doubt for last season, in my opinion, because he won us a trophy. But this season, there is no excuses. There's none. So if he performs last season, this season, he'd be out the door by September, by the end of September. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
There is no excuses with him on that. I don't want to go fully in on Moyes. I don't, but he has got to change his ways. Like we played 5 systems last year, and we didn't know which one was the best one. So there's a lot of issues at West Ham. Obviously, what people say about Sullivan, me personally, you take Sullivan out, you put an ambitious owner in, you got an ambitious team. Put the two together, you start winning a lot more stuff and competing at the higher end of the table. Right? West Ham shouldn't be fighting the relegation battle. Like I've always said this, yeah, and I will keep banging the drum on E20 and wherever I go. Yeah, once we left Upton Park in 2015, 2016 season, that's it. Like we should have been like top 10, top 12. I can accept that as a West
Sort
Ham
of
fan.
promised. That's what they promised us, didn't they? So.
Yeah, but it's not a lot. It's not a lot. It's not like we're asking for a trophy every single season.
But we don't, do we? We don't ask for that. We ask for good football. Sorry, I'm interrupting you. Sorry.
That's all right, Luke, right? But just to round it up for me, I want West Ham to have a project and a plan. Now, if we go out and sign 22, 23-year-olds, right, and it doesn't work out this season, I'm not going to lose my shit because I know that in 2 or 3 years' time, these players could all come good. We've got to go down the Brighton model, right? And they've got it down to a T. And we're a bigger club than Brighton. We've got a bigger fan base than Brighton. If it's good enough for Brighton, it's good enough for us at the end of the day. Simple as that.
Yeah, and I suppose that's the one thing that we're probably all envious of when it comes to Brighton. I mean, their ability to identify and recruit young talent is incredible. I mean, I don't know what system exactly they've got set up there, but we need a spy over there. Get someone out of that club who knows intimately how they're doing.
But you know what though, Tommy? Yeah, I said this earlier on. Yeah, when I done something earlier on, and you was in the chat. West Ham are too sentimental with players. Yeah, Brighton are not sentimental with players. They bring players in, they build them up, and they sell them for a vast amount of money. Like, and I see people today mention about bringing Dimitri Payet back at Brighton 4. Like, do you know what I'm saying? So we can't be sentimental, right, with players. Right, we have to have a plan, right. Now, I'm not saying West Ham be a selling club. I'm not saying that, but what I am saying is development of players and like buy low, sell high, and make us go up the league rather than down it is the way forward. It is.
Yeah, and just to respond to Verge, you're saying you need some young players, but you also need experience. Remember, Robert Cook, Lena Miller. No arguments here, and I don't. Anybody would argue with that, Verge. The problem is we have experienced players coming out of our arses at West Ham. And what we need now is not more experienced older players. That's the last thing we need. What we need now is an injection of youth. We need an injection of young talent. We're the second oldest squad in the Premier League. We've got to get that number down. It's too high. And if we go signing the likes of, James Ward-Prowse, who's going to be 29 in December. Polinia will be 29 during the season. And we're not talking about peanuts. These are not, squad players that we're just picking up nice and cheap. These are big money players. We would spend, Fulham were talking like 50 million quid.
Yeah, but
for Polinia. And it's not a slight on Polinia. I really like him. I think he's a really, really good player. But if that's going to be David Moyes' idea of signing, he's not, as Luke said it earlier, he's not signing for the future whatsoever. He's literally signing players for 50 million and 30 million for next season.
Yeah, right. But what does me, though, is that people never knew who Paulinho was last season, but they won't give Fofana a chance. Right, do you know what I mean? Moyes is waving away Fofana, and Fofana plays for the French national side. Didier Deschamps knows talent when he sees it. Like, he's got poor talent in the French sort of.
If you're in the French squad, you're a fucking good player.
Exactly, right? Now, I look at it like this, yeah? There's got to be a sort of plan, right, going forward, and not keep sort of like sustainability. People think, oh, we'll just sustain it. Oh, no, I want to go up. I want West Ham to be fighting again. Like, let's go back to COVID season, yeah, right now. It's one of the best seasons that we've had, yeah, football-wise, right? You look at the football we played, it was electric, right? Some of the games we played where we blasted teams out the ground, 3-0s, 3-2s, all sorts, yeah? I don't want to see West Ham sort of grinding out 1-0 wins and all that and just playing like negative football. I want to see West Ham going for it because that's what we've always been brought up on. Do you know what I'm saying? You go down fighting sort of thing. And under Moyes, he's brought us a trophy where no one can argue with him with that. But the style of football and the style of play isn't good. And that has to be developed, in my opinion.
Yeah. And when it comes to signings, obviously, look, I think, probably been linked with over 150 players at this point. Most of it probably complete bollocks that we never actually had any interest in. But
just on that point that James made. Sorry, by the
go
way.
ahead. Yeah.
What to highlight Moyes' lack of knowledge of the modern game and players, etc. He was asked during a press conference about a tweet or along them lines by Fabrizio Romano. I take it you two know who he is, right? David Moyes scoffed and said, "Oh, is he a local boy, is he?" I was like, mate, you're a professional football manager in the Premier League. If you don't know who he is, you need to sort of educate yourself a little bit, because it's to just scoff him off. I know he's pretty defensive and things are getting written about him at the time. He was under pressure. But I was going, if you don't know who he is, like, I'm not saying everyone knows who he is and everyone should, but to a degree, like, you know, he's a huge name in football. You know, he deals with all the transfer speculation, all the transfer links. And if you're a manager and you're going, who is he? It's a bit like, if you don't know who he is, you're not going to know who some 18-year-old rocket in the French league who's tearing up is going to be either. So he's very. Like I said, I don't know if you heard James, but you can tell what the players we're linked with. You can tell which players are Tim Stein to which players
100%, mate.
are Moyes, and it's so obvious.
And this is where, and you can also see this is where the disconnect is laid bare, right? Because Moyes is on record as saying that one of the major issues we had last season was bedding in players who weren't used to the Premier League, who were coming from abroad. His players, by the way. But he was saying, no, it took him too long to adjust and to get used to the Premier League, and that's why we had the really bad first half of the season and all this. And so he wants to sign Palhinha and James Ward-Prowse and these players who are Premier League ready. No, I disagree with that policy. Obviously, but Tim Steidten is the kind of fellow who's saying, actually, I've got a dossier here of absolute crackers
the problem
who are
is
playing in Europe. That we can sign, who are young and talented and won't cost the world. And Moyes, I think, just doesn't really want to know about them players.
He just doesn't develop players, Moyes. It's as simple as that. Like, at the end of the day, right, this is West Ham's best moment. I don't know whether anyone would agree, but we've just won a trophy. We're in the Europa League. This is as good as it's going to get for West Ham at present. Yeah, until there's a lot of investment. Sullivan goes out the fucking door, etc. Right? Now, at the end of the day, you bring in younger players and develop over a period of time. The time is now. You don't bring in players of 28, 29 with no sell-on value, and, they'd be good for a season or two, but there's no long-term plan. There's just none. And for me, right, that's on Moyes at the end of the day, that is. But this is where the problem is with Tim and Moyes. Tim's got his idea and his philosophy, and his philosophy is younger, fitter, fresher players who are sort of have a long-term plan, and Moyes is for the here and now, and that's where they're going to clash.
And that's what I don't understand.
The other thing as well is that if you go for Premier League proven all the time, it's going to cost you a lot more money. If you go for an English player, or you go for like Maguire or Palhinha, 50 million, very near enough, compared to like 3 guys in a Danish league for like 30 million, 10 million each. It costs you more money to get Premier League proven, and if you don't, they hit the ground running.
Yeah, but I don't believe in that, Luke. I don't believe in all that Premier League proven bollocks, because Bowen wasn't Premier League proven.
No, I agree with you. Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying?
It's like he's gone back on his own system, because you bring in Bowen, who was virtually unknown. I mean, I liked him personally, just not being arrogant, but I followed him quite a lot. To be fair, I wanted to West Ham to sign him when we did.
Yeah, but if you remember at the start of last season, I mean, we lost Aguero. We had injuries at centre back. He had to chuck Thilo Kehrer in at centre back. First game of the season, and he started out really well. I mean, you have to say Thilo Kehrer did. I know he's had a mixed season, but he did hit the ground running. Yeah, those early games where he had to play because we didn't really have another option. Thilo Kehrer had never played Premier League before. No. He came in, hit the ground running, looked really good early on. We thought, fucking hell, we've got a bargain here. We've pulled PSG's pants down. So I don't necessarily buy into this crappy. I think it's in Moyes' head.
I mean, right now his philosophy is playing Premier League
into the Premier League. They're footballers. They play football. No, we're not trying to teach them how to play cricket.
Tommy, just say that's his job. That's their job.
That's your job. That's your job.
They've been doing this since they were 5 years old, Moyes. I'm sure they
Yeah.
can handle it.
The biggest one for him, realistically, that no one really talks about enough now because it didn't come back to us. But Jesse Lingard, to pull him out of the wilderness at Man United when no one was when everyone was taking the piss out of him basically for not playing, not scoring goals, not doing assists, to come in and hit the ground running and smash it and thinking, how has Moyes thought he's the one to go for? He's the one that's going to score, however many was 12 goals in how many games or whatever many he scored. And it's like, he hasn't. He's the other thing as well is his mentality. When he first went to West Ham, they asked him, "What does he do?" or whatever. What's his intention? And he was like, "I'll win. That's what I do. I'll win." And now it's like it's just nice to compete, really, innit? It's just nice to be in and amongst the top 8, top 10, and you can just see if that mentality's gone from him. It's like where did what happened to make him go? I don't want a Bowen. I don't want a Lingard. I don't want to win. I just want to, be in there and thereabouts. It's very strange what's happened to him since. I'm going to say since January of the season before last, because the Europa League run was fantastic, but it's still painted over cracks with us in the league, and I'm over the moon that we won the Conference League, obviously. But again, since he come back to West Ham over the 4 or 5 years or consecutive, how long he's been here, he's gone from a bloke who wants to win, picks out players out of nowhere, and turns Antonio from a sort of fairly subpar winger to an on-fire Premier League striker, to now sort of celebrating fighting relegation and celebrating a fairly an amazing trophy win, but kind of the whole mentality shift from him has been, I'm a manager that wins, I've been Man United manager and all this sort of stuff, and then suddenly goes, well, it's just nice to compete. I just think it's a mentality. I think where is it? Where is his confidence changed? Where is his defensiveness come from?
I don't think the board have any faith in him, mate. If you want me to be honest, if you fancy Moyes as like the manager for the next 3 years, they would have offered him a contract after the cup final.
Yeah.
They would have said, "Here you go. There's a year extension on top of your contract." Which, for me, they should have either sacked him, or just said, or done a mutual consent and said, "Right, we'll go our separate ways," sort of thing. Or they offer him a 1 year extension. You like to give him no extension, and basically he's going to be working on the job now to try and earn a contract. Now that could work for us if West Ham come out firing in the first 10, 12 games and we look good. With the players that we signed, then great. But if we don't, then he could be sacked. We could have a new manager in, and then basically the signings that we're going for have been a waste of time. Like it's just been a waste of time. Like so, it's a dangerous game they're playing West Ham on this one. Like the staff not turning up, not being at West Ham is another thing. Are staff members really going to want to sign for David Moyes if they think he's only got 1 year? I don't think they are. Do you know what I'm saying? I think they're going to look more long term than that. So that's a problem. But Moyes has got to put his finger out this season. It's simple as that. And in the league, and people will look at the Conference League and go, "It's amazing. It's everything." Listen, it was amazing, right? I've got a picture there of how amazing it was, right?
Yeah.
But the way I look at it is that's history now. It's on to the next, and that's what it should be. It really is.
Yeah, I mean, that's the other thing. I mean, the fact that not only have we not signed a single player yet, 3 weeks before our first game at Bournemouth, we haven't replaced Nevin or Warburton.
Yeah.
No, I don't know for certain whether we had
Steve Brown's coming out.
warning that Warburton and Nevin were going to leave, or if they just dropped it kind of out of the blue at the end of the season. But it would be quite bad form to just drop it at the end of the season. Just, oh, by the way, I'm out, I'm away. But you'd imagine there must have been some kind of heads up from both of them before the end of the season. Look, once the end of the season, look, I'm going to move on and stuff. And it's astonishing to me at this point in the summer, we don't have a single player signed, and we don't have either of the two coaches replaced. Either. It's
I think Warburton was on a Talk Sport, and I haven't seen any interview, but apparently he was saying he left because he didn't want to fall out with David Moyes as a friend, which obviously means they were clashing during training. And then I think Nevin has gone to Strasbourg, apparently, to work under Patrick Vieira. So good luck to him. Obviously, he just wants to change, which is fair enough. But there is a part of me that when David Moyes can't keep his coaching mates happy, Stuart Pearce left for whatever reason. There's been quite a few that have gone through the merry-go-round, and obviously you had Irvine leave very early on for family reasons, but I don't always buy that personally. There's a part of me that's thinking that Moyes is like, right, you can all fuck off because I can do this on my own. I've won a trophy. You haven't won a trophy. I'm the one that's done it here. I've got a year left on my contract. Everyone else can do one. I'm more than capable of running this team on my own. I know it's delusional and probably a lot of rubbish that I'm talking now, but there is a part of me that thinks, well, if we haven't replaced the coaches or whatever, especially with having someone like Tim in, because he could bring coaches in from next to nowhere. You could just go, right, this guy from Spain, this guy from Germany, this guy from Brazil, whoever, they can come in. But if David Moyes ain't having them, there's that aspect as well. I've said this in a few other videos before as well. I'm not too sure people are understanding how much of a eruption bringing this director of football into the club, proper director of football, not just Mark Noble learning the job, how much it will change the dynamic of the club. And I know there's a lot of rumours and conspiracy theories about why he's actually there, who's put him there, rather than it being Sullivan or whoever. But the director of football does more than pointing out transfer targets. He directs the football club. He tells it where it should go. And if he's come in from Bayer Leverkusen wanting more power, that means that he'll be putting his foot down a bit more than he would have done at other clubs. And I agree with everyone saying that there's going to be clashes, but I don't think it's just over transfers. I think it'll be about everything. And David Sullivan will be the first person to go, look, I could sell this club if I wanted to, but I don't. There'd be a lot of conversations about, are we having new owners in? Are the investors going to put more money in? Is Kretinsky going to have more involvement? I just think there's a lot going on behind the scenes, and it doesn't really make sense to me. I think transfers, where the club are concerned, is probably the last thing on their mind, because their whole structure is getting torn apart at the minute, and it's being rebuilt and redirected.
Let me ask you a question, Luke. So what is the plan? Because for me, I'll just say this quickly. Yeah, for me personally, I don't see where the next sort of 2-year plan is. It seems like to me that we want to sign players that are proven Premier League players, but just to sort of sustain this, rather than the long-term future of West Ham.
I don't personally think the owners know how to be successful. We've gone into this Europa Conference League, and in my opinion, had it fairly easy up until the quarterfinals, where Genk, I can't remember who they were exactly. They gave us a little bit of a fright in the first leg, rolled them over second leg, fair enough. But in against Alkmaar, it wasn't a complete rollover. We had to work hard to get through that, and then the final was a great final. But up until that, the Conference League was like even though it was quite easy to get through the group stage and the other rounds and stuff like that, it was kind of like a silver lining in a crap season. And that's obviously, in my opinion and many others, it's what kept Moyes in the job. And without that, he would have gone before that if he got knocked out at some stage. So I think Sullivan's probably sitting there going, just won the Conference League, got a trophy, our name around Europe is now bigger, we're now in the Europa League again. So let's just see how this goes. And I don't think there's a plan as such. I think it's just kind of like let's just see how long this can go on for, because at the minute we're on a high. We've just won our first trophy in football.
How indecisive is that?
But
how indecisive is that? It's just typical of the way this club is run.
Well, did Moyes, when he first, I think on the first 6 months he come back, or the first year, they were saying, you're doing really well at West Ham. He went, this is part of the plan. This is part of my plan. They were actually ahead of the plan as we've qualified for Europe already, and I didn't think we'd do as well as we have in this season. And then we've got there now. So he said himself a couple of years ago that he was in front of his plan for the club itself. He also said in that CEO interview, the podcast, that he was trying to change the ethos and the traditions at West Ham, and wasn't sure how the fans were going to react to that. And I think it's probably one of those things where they've won a trophy, and for me personally, the arrogance of Sullivan and Moyes will be sky high, because they've done what West Ham haven't done for 43 years.
I think Sullivan was looking for any excuse to keep him.
Well, this is
to be honest. I mean, look, there were numerous times during that season he would have been well within his rights to sack David Moyes. Within his rights. He never once pulled the trigger, never once, and he could have at any number of points in the season. He stuck with him all the way to the bitter end of the season, and I think winning the Conference
And
League,
he was proved right, wasn't he?
winning the conference. Don't know what you mean by that.
No, because that's what he'll think. That's what he'll think.
Oh, that's what he'll think. I mean, frankly,
you know,
any number of managers could have won the Conference League for us. I mean, we didn't play a decent team as far as I'm concerned. We did not play an actual, proper, decent European side until the final.
Fiorentina were a decent side. I would say that. That was the best side we played in the whole competition, 100%.
That's what I mean. I think they were the only
two best played each other in the end,
Yeah, I think Fiorentina were the only proper side that we played in that whole tournament. Any number of managers could have won us that tournament. You watch Villa go and win it next season under.
I think they will.
I'm calling it now. Villa are going to win it next season.
See, the thing
that's
is,
an eminently winnable trophy.
Right, I understand
for a Premier League club, and that was the only excuse that was needed by Sullivan to say, "Oh, can't sack him now, lads. He's just won us a trophy."
Yeah. So the thing is, right, I understand what you were saying, but there was games last season. I remember like 2 key games: Everton at home, Nottingham Forest at home. 2 games where if he would have lost them games or drew them games, he'd have been gone. Like I think the Everton game was the one where he was literally, if he lost that game, he was going to be out and Rafa Benitez was going to be in, and the bookmakers were going mad with that. Do you know what I'm saying? I understand what people are saying about Moyes, but if Moyes was to change and he was to turn up and he was to start playing fluent football, I think that's all the fans would want. That's all what needs to be added, really. Do you know what I mean? It's the style of play that's killing people really deep down. They're looking at it and thinking, like the other day against Tottenham, I know it's a friendly, but you still got to look at it. Like 24% possession. Like it's only sustainable for a little amount of time before it gets done. Do you know what I mean? So I am concerned about it, but it's Moyes. And with Sullivan, and this is the argument I've had with many other YouTube channels, Moyes is not the problem. Sullivan's the problem because Sullivan is employing him. He's employing Moyes, and let's be honest, if Sullivan wasn't in charge and there was a ambitious owner in charge, Moyes wouldn't be in a job. No. He wouldn't be in a job. Like as simple as that.
No, he's been found out, and he's even admitted that himself. And you know, he tried new things, but he's stuck in his way. I don't think even if he wanted to change, I don't think he could. I think he's too uneducated to change. I think he's too little. He's too close-minded to change. And I've watched games where we've played, in my opinion, what is kind of like anti-West Ham football, the counter-attacking football, right? We've done it with intensity. We've won games. I think it was like the Man United game at the end of the season. We won 1-0. We played well. We played well against Man United. But that still, to me, wasn't a West Ham of a classic West Ham game where you know the players are playing passing triangles, fluent football. It was all like hard graft, and we played Man United off the park. But it wasn't classic West Ham.
But what would you say? What would you say though, Luke? Right, is West Ham's best sort of attacking season now? COVID season, when West Ham are going to places like Leicester and banging 3 in there. The 3-0 against Arsenal at home in COVID season, where in 30 minutes we was 3-0 up. That's the West Ham I want to see. Like West Ham are a counter-attacking side. Do
you know? Honestly, I'll be honest with you. The best West Ham I've ever seen personally in my life is the 2015-2016 West Ham under Bilic, because we had Pyatt, and Pyatt was the talisman for that. He kept it going. I've never known personally West Ham to be a counter-attacking team. We used to, I think, when I was growing up, it was like the counter-attacking team. Oh, we know we'll have the ball a lot more then. The West Ham will play a lot of. But if West Ham, the classic West Ham, like you know, the Alan Pardew West Hams or the Bilic West Hams on top, if they played a counter-attacking team, you knew they'd have a lot of the ball. But the problem is you'd have to
West Ham don't control games. I have this argument on E20 with the boys, and they say to me, West Ham are more of like a West Ham going to try and control games. Now, for me personally, obviously I'm 36 years old. I've grown up with Di Canio, Cole, Carrick, and all them lot. West Ham have always been a counter-attacking side from what I remember, because West Ham are usually defending. Like, you know what I'm saying? So when West Ham are defending, they usually hit teams on the break. Yeah. So
I think, to be fair, James, I think under certain managers there were plenty of times where we were a toe-to-toe kind of team, where we were willing to go attack for attack. That was back in the days. You remember, we'd either fucking win 3-2 or lose 3-2, or there was always every West Ham game. We've always been on a lot of live Sky kind of Sky Live games because there's always going to be a few goals
But
in a
what it
West
is-
Ham game
But
traditionally.
what it is, when West Ham, they're usually defending 9 times out of 10. Like back in the day, we'd be defending for our lives. Then
We can't defend very well. That was a problem as well, wasn't it?
and that was the problem. But obviously now we set up in a way that and it'd be interesting to see what you think about systems, because I
don't see. Here's the thing, James. I don't think the real problem for fans is necessarily the style of play in that sense. I think if we're to be set up as a counter-attacking team where Moyes likes to get players behind the ball, defend kind of deep, be solid, be tough to break down, tough to score against, and then be really good at hitting people on the counter. There was a time under Moyes when we were.
Yeah, we were.
And I think the main thing is, okay, if the style of play isn't going to be pretty, you've got to fucking win games. And we were fine with it when we were winning games under Moyes, even though it was never pretty, but we were winning games. We were scoring goals, and we were good on the counter-attack. We were a huge threat on set pieces. I think if you're going to set up the way Moyes sets up, you better win games. Because if you start playing, if you're playing shit football and losing, you ain't going to get away with it. You can get away with a kind of crappy style of play if it's working, and there was a time that it was. But once that stops working and you're losing games, you're down the bottom of the table, that will not fly whatsoever because people don't want to watch crap football and lose games.
Yeah, but it's not sustainable.
They'll put up with it if you're winning.
Like the thing is, it's not sustainable. Like to play that sort of grinding football. Like I had this argument the other day, and I said, like, if we set up 5 at the back against Luton away from home, that to me is just not cool in my eyes. I want to see West Ham 4-3-3 on the front foot, and I think we sort of knock ourselves a little bit because we are quite a good attacking side. If we get going, we've got good attacking players in our team.
Yeah, and that's the frustrating thing. I remember you reminded me of one game there. It was live on Sky a couple of seasons ago. This is when, like I say, when Moyes just sits back and defends it, like he's terrified of everyone we play. And I think we were at home to Brighton. And we just got everyone behind the ball and sat back and let Brighton dictate everything. And I remember Gary Neville. Yeah, Gary Neville was the co-commentator, and he kept on. He was saying, "I can't understand this." He says, "Moyes is set up like they're playing Real Madrid."
Yeah, and listen, I remember that game clear as day. I think it was Boxing Day. I think it was 2-2, and we had Haller and Bowen up front, and it was like basically the rest of them were all defensive-minded players. I understand, with some aspect of that controlling games. You want to go into data analysis and things like that, and like XG and all that game, then that's fair enough. That's on you. For me, 4-3-3 attacking football is what I want to see at West Ham because West Ham are always going to defend games. Like West Ham ain't going to always be like destroying teams on the attack. Like they're going to have to defend, and I want to see West Ham counter attack these teams with pace. And that's what I want us to buy this summer is pace because we ain't got none. We've got one player really who's got any sort of whip about him, and that's Bowen. And other than that, the rest of them are sort of bang average is sort of the pace factor. Do you know what I'm saying? It's like I don't understand the sort of 5 at the back. But again, if you've got a defensive minded manager, he's always going to think defense first, attack later, isn't it? Let's be honest.
It's funny because you mentioned 3 at the back, and everyone automatically thinks defensive, but it's not always that way. That you can get teams that can transition between defense and attack very quickly with a 5/3 at the back. You got Man City. Man City were quite good at it for a few years.
I agree. I think I don't get hung up on formations.
What it is?
It's the tactical approach. You can use any formation to be really defensive.
Yeah.
Equally, you can use any formation to be set up to play really well on the counter. It's how you set the team up and the attitude that the manager has. So I don't get too hung up on formations. To me, it's the philosophy.
I don't remember ever West Ham playing good in a 5-3-2.
Probably not. We probably didn't. No.
Yeah.
It's being us.
Like for me, when I look at West Ham, 4-3-3, 4-2-3-1. I like them systems. 4-4-2 is okay to a point, but we only played it once last season against Fulham away, which was awful. When I look at us 5-3-2, I remember Aston Villa away last season. It was a smash and grab, 1-0 win, 4-0 scored the goal. The first half, we had no shots on target. And if you go back last season, you go through a lot of them games, How many times in the first half did we not have one shot on target? And that's not how it should be, mate. I'm going to be real. I want to see West Ham have a go at these teams, because I can accept West Ham losing. I've seen us lose more than enough times over the many years of my life, right? And so have you, so has Tommy, so has everyone, yeah. But what I can't accept is sitting there and just waiting for a team to score against us. That's one thing I can't, because you're just sitting there, and I think I remember it clear as day with Tottenham last season. Tottenham were in a bad moment. We go to White Hart Lane. We set up 5-3-2. We just sit there and wait for their fullbacks to score against us. It's just not cool.
There was an interview with.
But to me, that's still a philosophy issue, not necessarily a formation issue. I think it's because Moyes is so ultra defensive.
But he's going to go with a defensive formation only, though, Tommy. He ain't going to go 4-3-3 and be defensive, is he? He's going to go 5-3-2 and be defensive. That's where the argument is.
Other managers might go more attacking with that same formation.
Yes, but again, it's because of his philosophy, not the formation itself.
Mm.
Yeah, there was an interview with Rio Ferdinand, and I asked him why it didn't work out for Moyes at Man United. And he said, "Look, I can't talk. We're both professionals and whatever. I'm not going to slag him off or anything like that." He said, "But the one thing that the mentality change was that Ferguson had us going into war with teams, to attack teams. That we're Man United. We don't fear anyone. We're going to do what we do to all teams." But he said that there was one particular game where they were playing Chelsea. And I think he said for like one whole day of the week at training, Moyes was like, fear Hazard. Basically, was the message was like, just work on Hazard, make sure he doesn't do this, that, and the other. And they're like, yeah, but what can we do to them? And he was like, no, we're not concentrating on that. We're concentrating on what Hazard can do to us. And it was like the whole mentality change. It's like, wow, this is madness for a Man United manager to be telling us this.
United were too big for him.
It's quite interesting because he said that Alex Ferguson was like one of his idols or heroes in management, and then you end up being the complete opposite to what he, and on the face of it, they were good. Man United at their prime were a good counter-attacking team at their best as well, which is quite interesting.
Yeah, I mean, look, Moyes had managed Preston North End and Everton. He couldn't wrap his head around a club like Man United. He couldn't wrap his head around the fact that he was at one of the biggest clubs in world football, perennial trophy winners at that time. So he went and signed Fellaini from Everton. Where he should have been saying, "We're Man United. We're going to sign the best players in the world and go and win trophies." In his head, it was, "Oh, let's go get Fellaini." It was too big for him. He can't wrap his head around. He can't wrap his head around a club that size. He just can't do it.
No,
he's a poverty manager.
Look, on the face of it, right? I'm sitting here with no faith in David Moyes at all, and I think I'm perfectly justified in that, despite the fact that we won the Conference League. But I want West Ham to do well. So while he's West Ham manager, I want him to succeed. Not because I want Moyes to succeed himself. If anyone in the chat is thinking, I hate Moyes, I don't really hate him, to be fair. I think he's a bit pathetic in modern football terms for his philosophy, the way he handles himself, for his tactics, for his team selection. Selecting Souček all season long when he was quite frankly useless. And for me, Flynn Down should have been given a chance in a couple of games over him. The things add up, they stack up, and the funny thing is, if you talk to non-West Ham fans who don't watch West Ham every week, they go, "Yeah, how can you want to get rid of Moyes still? We won you a trophy." You're thinking, you don't watch us every week, you don't see the ins and outs, you don't see what goes on.
But what's the line though for you though, Uka? Like, what is the line? Like, because there has to be a line where it's either you think he's done all right or you think he's done crap. Like, so what is the line for you?
It's mad, isn't it? Because you win the trophy and you think he's justified himself to some extent. And it's a massive success. He's won West Ham a trophy. I've never seen West Ham win a trophy. I'll probably never see us win a trophy ever again. To be honest with you, just the reality.
But to me, that's short-sighted.
But the bar is that, like, I've gone to West Ham. I'm a season ticket holder, and my little reference to it is that when we signed Allardyce, my dad was dead set against it because it was like West Ham was selling their soul, getting a long ball merchant who just didn't like playing attacking West Ham football in the first place. And I was like, right, okay, that's I didn't agree with him at the time. I thought Allardyce was a good pick to get us that championship and all the stuff like that. And then now I go to games and I see us hoofing the ball up to Antonio and etc. etc. And I go, can I just ask you, what is the difference between this and Allardyce football? Because to me, it was exactly the same. It's getting the ball from the back and hoofing it up and hoping Antonio does all the rest and setting up players. And I think he was just like, look, at the time I was pissed off with it, but now, we're in Europe and Allardyce never had us in Europe. And I think little things like that. I don't really can't remember the conversation itself, but for me, the league comes first. There's no doubt about that. The league is your foundation. If you're doing well in the league, you're showing ambition by default by being in the top 6 or the top 8. You thereabouts. I'd love us to win a cup or go have a cup run. So if he can get us in a cup run, if he can start using youth players a bit more, if he can show the ambition that we were showing a couple of seasons ago when we were chasing the top 4. Didn't get there, almost got there, but didn't get there. If he can do his Europa League heroics that he did 2 seasons ago and get us to a semi-final, something like that, if he can start to show the fans that the old David Moyes and the old West Ham are back to the team that even though they did play counter-attacking football, defensive, we were fucking good at it. And we were fucking good at counter-attacking. We were good, all our players were on fire. You thought Bowen would score a goal every game. You thought Ben Ryan would definitely score a goal. You thought Lingard or Souček or one of them would definitely go. Dawson from a corner. If you could, if he could say, show us a team with that same intensity and that same drive, right, I'd be all up for keep. But I don't think he's got that anymore. I think he's lost that.
But there is only there's one problem with that. Now, what you just said there about the young players integrating the youth players, I'm all for that, mate. I'm with you, 100%. But if West Ham have a sort of stagnated season, are the fans going to be on Moyes' case because of the season? And then on the other hand, he's integrating the youth. Like, because you can't have it both ways. Like, you see what I'm saying? Like, we can't have it that we're going to do very well in the league and integrate with the youth. Do you know what I mean? If it don't work out, people are going to say, well, he's integrating the youth, but the season's crap. Do you know what I mean?
They to a level they sort of come hand in hand because I think you play the youth. Most managers play the youth when they have, unless it's a player they truly believe in. Like I think Liverpool done it this season. I think they brought in a Spanish midfielder who was crap first.
Well, I mean, you don't have to chuck the 4 of them into the starting 11.
If you got a league,
them better than that.
If you got a League Cup game away to Cambridge, for example, you would justify playing 2 or 3 youth players maybe because you're thinking, well, if you're going to make it in a West Ham team, this is like the first standard that you've got to show that you can play at or something like that. You got Mabama. The only reason why I say youth as well in particular is because they won the Youth Cup in the way they did. They were devastating. They went to Arsenal, won 5-1, and the nucleus of that team is all I've heard from West Ham coaches and YouTube videos and all the things I've watched the footage is that this team is as close to being is the Carrick and Joe Cole and Jermaine Defoe nucleus that we had back in 2000, 2001, 2002, whatever you want to call it, or the Man United class of 92, that what they could do for Man United.
But the only difference with that is though, Luke, is that I can accept that back in 2003 because West Ham weren't competing at the sort of higher end of the table. West Ham were always flirting with relegation, right, to a point. Now, West Ham have got more financial power to go out and sign a player rather than develop a player.
There is that.
So I can listen. The youth should be a bonus, really. Mbamba should be a bonus. Potts should be a bonus, not like hoping that relying on these kids.
No, I totally agree. Yeah, 100%. But what I'm saying is you never sort of know until you give those players a chance. It's funny because Rice wasn't a perfect player when he first got the chance. It took him 10 games to really sort of settle himself and get a chance in the midfield because he made a mistake away against Arsenal, cost us the game pretty much 2-1. Joe Hart didn't communicate with him very well and we ended up losing the game, and that could have been the end of him there. He could have said, no, you're not playing anymore, done, ship him out, and that could have been the end of him. For me, I think that there's always room for youth players. But I made this point, funny enough, when we sold one of our players in the summer to Sunderland. I think it was one of Baptiste, was it? I think it was Jamal Baptiste. And there was a load of players saying, well, the youth players keep getting, it's like the final straw for most fans. This player was quite highly rated in the youth ranks and he'd been sold to Sunderland. And everyone was like, when are we finally going to see youth players? And thinking, as much as I understand their frustration, you have to be good enough. You have to be good enough. And if West Ham are fighting a relegation battle, maybe you can play in a away game, somewhere against one of your relegation rivals at the last 10 minutes, give them a bit of crack if we need a spark, if we need a bit of energy in the thing. But if you're chasing top 6 or top 4, you can't really use them unless you know that they're going to make a really big impact. So for me, the closest thing to that would be bringing Obama on for Antonio in the last 10 minutes in a game away to Liverpool, Man United, because he's built the same. He's built like a man, like the strength of him. He's the best one of the youth crop that could come in and go, right, if you're going to play any youth player, you're going to play Obama, because he has the build, the apparent mentality to make it in a professional football game, and clearly now, as we've seen in pre-season, scores goals. So if you're gonna sort of bring players in, you bring in players at the right time, and you can go and buy 5 players from Europe or from the Premier League and complement the team and evolve them and make them better, but and use them as a bonus. That's fine. But if you kind of go, we've got this striker in the youth team, right? I know you just bought this player for 10 million, but this guy could use a chance. Maybe use the opportunity as more of a bonus. Thinking, no, we have to start giving our youth players in, because if you get to a point where you might have so many good youth players in your team that if they're just not getting a chance, it's because you'd rather rely on a player who's scoring goals and playing well.
It works both ways though. Let's
Yeah.
be honest, because you can't, like you're saying about. Listen, I'm all for the youth, but sometimes you've got to integrate them in with quality also. Like they've got to have quality of players around them to be quality. Like I know.
I personally, for argument's sake, wouldn't want to bring him in under Moyes. Personally, I think Moyes would ruin him. The way the whole team play, because the whole team of experienced professionals sometimes are playing with one hand tied behind their back, playing for Moyes.
Yeah.
So if you were to sack Moyes and bring in someone like who's been linked to Xabi Alonso, or someone who is more forward thinking, is a modern type manager, that's when I'd want the youth players to be brought in, because they wouldn't.
I don't know. I think if you've got a couple of really talented youngsters, and we do appear to have that at the moment, I think you can integrate them into a team. If you've got 2 of them in there, they've got 9 other really good pros around them.
The trouble is as well.
I don't think it necessarily means it's going to be a disaster.
The trouble is,
you start losing every week because you've integrated a couple of talented youngsters into the team. I think it's absolutely doable if there's a couple of youngsters there that you feel are good enough. I think Mubama absolutely next season can be properly integrated into that team. Not saying necessarily start every week, but he should get plenty of minutes next season, Mubama. He really should. But we don't know exactly who will or won't be here. As what our striker options will be, but I really think Mubama should be ahead of Ings in the pecking order next season.
Yeah, but so how many games minimum then? Because I said this earlier on, like you have to give them at least minimum 10 games then, at least that's bare minimum. Like if Mubama's going to stay here for next season, you've got to give him at least 10, at least. Like, and that's substitute appearances, even first team starting. Like
Mubama should be coming on ahead of Danny Ings, in my opinion.
I think you'd do something like, if you've got to look at the games you've got coming up as well. So if you had a Europa League game against a team in one of the lower leagues in Europe, or if you had a cup game coming up and sandwiched between 2 league games, I'd do something like, if we had Liverpool away, say, I'd bring Mubama on for the last 5 minutes, because they won't know anything about him. It'd be a shock to the system with his running intensity. You'd then play him maybe in the next game if it was away against, I don't know, Swansea away in a League Cup game. Then come the next week, if we're playing at home to, I don't know, a mid-table team, say, bring him on for 20 minutes or 30 minutes.
But the only thing with that, Luke, I understand what you're saying. Listen, I do, right? I really do understand what you're saying. But the only problem with that is, can we really take the risk if we want to go and try and win another trophy next season?
I think you should do sometimes. I think you should risk it, because literally it can go both ways. You can either lose the game or you can win the game.
I think James, you're summing up exactly how David Moyes feels about it. He just will not do it. He's afraid. He's afraid to put young, talented players in the team and give them a chance. He won't. I think he takes the same attitude as you. That he just doesn't want to risk young players that he doesn't feel he can trust.
I think having him on coming on for the last 10 minutes, right, not having two goalkeepers on the bench is the
Yeah.
ideal thing. Like, I
Yeah.
don't want to see that ever again, having two
No.
goalkeepers on the
He'll
bench.
do it
Now,
again though.
if West Ham are chasing a game or hunting down a goal, throw Mbamba on all day long. I'm all
That's
for
what I'm getting at. Yeah.
I'm all for that, yeah. But when I look at sort of him and looking at the younger players, I'd rather West Ham obviously buy younger and then integrate them into like an Arsenal project. Now, I see Arsenal, yeah, and I see the way they do things. And I have this on the 20 wheel with West Ham Online, and he keeps telling me that the Arsenal project's a wonderful project. They're signing younger players and the way they're going about it. There's nothing stopping West Ham from signing younger players and going for a project of similar, but not with the same expectation. Right? I'm not expecting West Ham to sign a load of youngsters and compete for the league, but what I am expecting is West Ham to sign youngsters and sort of integrate the youth from what we've got with other players that could be a really, really good team for the future.
Yeah, I mean, look, Arsenal didn't say that about Saka. They knew they had a very talented young man on their hands, and they
Yeah.
gave him his chance. They didn't say, "No, look, he's very talented, but we don't want to play him in case because he's so inexperienced and
Yeah.
he's young, and we don't want to play him because just in case it backfires on us." If you believe in a youngster, you've got to take the chance on him. There's no other way. If you're terrified of trying to give a talented youngster his chance, you may as well fucking pack up the academy and forget about it.
Yeah.
May as well
But
forget about it. It's a waste of time.
Moyes didn't want to play Rooney, did he, when he was coming through the Everton ranks?
No.
He didn't want to.
Moyes, Rooney has said this himself. He's on record. He said Moyes did not want to play Wayne Rooney when he was like 16, when he made his debut at home to Arsenal, scored twice. This was someone who the world already kind of knew about. Certainly, I knew who Wayne Rooney was already before he made his first team debut against Arsenal at Goodison. We already knew this guy was a wonder kid. Everybody was talking about Wayne Rooney, and Moyes still did not want to put him in the team.
I think I think there's to a level he's got a thing about egos. Even though he's got one himself, he's got something about, well, this kid who everyone thinks is really good. Maybe Rooney did have a really big ego even at that age and whatever, and he went, no, I want someone else in there who's got less of an ego and who totally loves me or trusts me or something like that. So it could be a defensive thing or whatever. But there's that kind of sent alarm bells ringing to me when you wouldn't play one of the big upcoming potentially world-class players and you wouldn't give them a chance, because whether you liked them or not, if you're a manager, you think, I need to win this game, surely you bring on someone who's potentially going to win in that game. And the interesting thing is, James, just on the point about going for a proven player rather than a youth player to win a game, for example, my worry with Moyes is that, for me, Ings doesn't fit our system at all, realistically, if he plays the Antonio way. So if you're going to bring Ings on because he's a safer bet, you'd have to bring him on when we're playing to his strengths. I'd rather if you play Ings in the Antonio role as from a sub, I would rather him bring Mabama on for Ings, because I think Mabama would be physically better to play the Antonio role than Ings would. That is kind of what I'm saying as well, is you've got to play to your strengths within the team. It's like against Tottenham in the pre-season game. I know it's pre-season. I didn't see it myself because I was at work, but a lot of people said that the young boys in the midfield really done well for themselves. And Liang, I think Liang at the back played really well as well. Now, that is the basics of what you have to do. You have to look good in pre-season. You have to play well within the other experience. If you look at a place, it's not a great start for you as a youth player. So this is what I'm saying is
Snazzy kind of makes a good point there in the chat. Is imagine if Brighton had said that about Ferguson. He's only 18, can't chuck him in and put him up front. Can't do that. He's only 18. He's inexperienced. You can't just chuck him in there. Well, they believed in him. They believed he was talented, and they gave him his chance, and they chucked him in there. And he got a hell of a lot of minutes last season, Ferguson, and is a cracking striker, and he's going to go a long way in the game. But to me, Moyes just isn't that manager. Moyes is not the kind of manager who's going to say, geez, we've got a really talented kid here. He's 18, but you know what? I'm going to give him his chance. I'm going to put him in. I'm going to play him. I'm going to keep playing. I'm going to see what this kid's got. At some point, you have to do it.
It's funny because I remember Perkins. Everyone was raving about Perkins and saying what a great striker he's going to be. And I think he come on as a sub against someone for the last 10 minutes, a sub appearance. And you know when you can see someone's mentality before they kick a ball. And I know that it's his debut. I know it's against a full crowd, and the pressure was on to, I think, find a winner or not concede a goal to draw, whatever it was. But he looked nervous. But you know, you look too nervous. It's like one of us going, right, we'll get a fan from the stands and he can come play for West Ham. Your bottle would, you'd be asked for going. You'd be scared, panicky. It didn't seem to me too settled, and I haven't seen many other youth players. Maybe I'm judging him in the wrong accord, but sometimes you can see a youth player come on, and instantly you go, "This is why they're giving him a chance." Because even before they touch the ball, they might be running around, or they're trying to bump with a centre back, or they're looking head up, they're looking available. And he was being raved about, scoring loads of goals in the youth team. And to me, he come on and look like a deer in headlights. It was. I was thinking, doesn't seem to be like he's wants, he's going to jump at this chance and run for this ball or whatever. So sometimes you can see before they even kick the ball how confident they are, where their mentality is at. And this is kind of what I'm saying is that I would rather. I would rather.
That's a bit harsh to me. You
Fair enough.
kid in, and then you for a sub appearance, and then doesn't immediately set the world on fire, and it's like,
No, I'm not saying that. So I'm not.
Well,
sorry, I'm not saying
you've
to the
only got
world
to look
like.
at you've only got to look at all the criticism that Flynn gets.
Yeah,
Like, Flynn,
no, I don't agree with that either.
Nor do I. I look at him as a young player, even though he's 24, he's same age as Deck. But what it is, people keep going having the comparison of Declan Rice with every other
No, it's
youth
not
player,
fair.
and
No.
it ain't because Declan Rice is a one of a kind. Then you got a lot of these youth players who could have the potential. But Declan Rice had a bad run at the start. I think people keep forgetting that. Like, he wasn't world class when he first
No,
arrived on the
totally
scene.
agree.
He was centre half, which Pellegrini converted into a sort of DM, which is the only
And
thing
the
Pellegrini done
important
good.
thing was that Pellegrini allowed him to make mistakes and allowed him to grow into the role, gain experience, learn, and put his trust in him. Like, Rice developed into the player he is over many, many, many games of football.
Last 3 years, I'd say. Last 3
Yeah,
years is when you sort of see
because they
the best.
played him and they played him and they played him.
I was having these conversations about Flynn Downs if it was my old man or sort of someone else as well, and they said, "Oh, whenever I see Flynn Downs, he doesn't seem to do much." I was thinking that's the best thing about a player in that position is that you don't see them, you don't see what they do because they do it in the shadows almost. It's like if you got a player like Flynn Downs, for me personally, if now Rice has been taken out, my perfect middle three would be Downs, Paqueta, and Fornals because you'd have Downs as a ball winner. You'd pass it along to Paqueta. Paqueta's a playmaker. He would set the tone in the midfield, play it through to Fornals, who's the attacking midfielder and would set the attack going, who could then set up the striker or have a shot himself. So for my mind is I'm not saying Flynn Downs should come in as the Rice replacement because he'll do exactly what Rice does. I'm saying that Flynn Downs should be given the replacement to do what he does well in our midfield and complement the midfield. And if that's making a tackle and if that's just barging a player out of the way or holding a player off, doing what a defensive midfielder does, not a box-to-box midfielder, a proper holding midfielder, like Kante used to be for Leicester. He used to do it, after our people realised how important he was because he just done the hard stuff. He done the stuff that really fans don't like to see because it's the boring stuff. It's the winning the ball.
Flynn Downs should have played an awful lot more last season than he did. I mean, Souček was fucking dog shit.
Passenger.
Yeah.
For most of that season, Souček was dog shit. And absolutely should have been dropped and give Flynn Downs his chance. So, right, Souček's playing like shit. In you go, son. Show us what you can do. Give him those run of games. Let him grow into the side. Let him grow into his abilities. Gain his confidence. Keep telling him you're doing great, son. Keep it up. And who knows what kind of a player we might have had by the end of the season.
Some of the games Flynn had last season away from home was borderline shocking, like i.e. not as in performance as in the teams he's playing against. Tottenham away, Liverpool away, Manchester United away, Brentford away, right, out of position. Right. I remember the Tottenham game clear as day because that's the one where he got a lot of flack, but that was on Moyes for putting him in an attacking role, which he's never been. Now, I see something last night on Twitter, and I had to laugh where people were saying, give Southampton Flynn Downs plus cash for James Ward-Prowse. he's one of our own, and people treat him like a piece of shit, like he's like nothing. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And he's the sort of person who will fight for absolute every ball. Do you know what I mean? What Flynn Downs is a £15 million championship player who's learning his trade in the Premier League. That's what he is. Yeah. Is he first choice for me? No, he's not. Like, sadly, not. He's not. Right. I think there's better quality out there that we can go and buy with the Declan Rice money. But to have him around the squad is ideal because he knows what it means to every fan. Yeah, he's the sort of person that could develop into something not amazing, but a decent footballer for West Ham, right?
Yeah, and the thing is, the frustrating thing is that, if he'd played all last season instead of Souček and played like Souček played last season, then I'd be saying, yeah, look, he's not up to it. He's not up to the Premier League. We may as well get rid. We've seen all season he's not good enough. Yeah. And yet we're talking about moving him on when he hasn't had a chance to show if he's good enough. And yet Souček will be here next season, probably fucking starting still. And he was fucking dog shit. And this is it's ridiculous.
I think the criticism Flynn gets is criminal, if I'm being honest. Like, when he ain't really done a lot wrong. Like, he had 21 games last season. I looked at the stats the other day. And he had 21 games, and I think he had a few real good performances in the conference, like where he was sort of shone.
I saw him, a few games, Brilliant.
Now, I'm not being funny. I'm not expecting a £15 million championship player to turn up and tear the world alight. And what people have got to get in their head is that they keep comparing him to Rice, and it's not. It's not a comparison, in my opinion. No. But Flynn's his own man at the end of the day, and he should be a sort of player that you rely on from the bench who could do a job. He's a man who can do a job for West Ham, yeah? And the way he gets treated, and I put a tweet out last night and I said, he's one of your own. Remember that. It just seems like when a player doesn't do well at West Ham for one season, it seems like the fan base just want to ship this geezer out and get someone in who's going to instantly hit the ground.
Yeah.
Now, if that's the case, the amount of players over the years that we could have lost. Like, do you know what I mean? Because like they did
around, best season for a long while.
Look, I backed Ben Rama up from the moment he arrived. And listen,
I still don't think he's the full article, but he's a much better season than he has compared to other seasons.
He's not a top class player, but he's a decent player for West Ham. And I think when you look at players over the years who have come in and had their moments, like you just can't ship the geezer out. Listen, if he stays at West Ham, Flynn Downs this season, and doesn't tear it up, then you've got every right. You've got every right to say, you know what, this ain't working. It's time for a change. But for one season, 21 games, most of them have been as a sub or against the big six away from home. When we're setting up in a defensive way, it's just not good in my opinion. It really ain't.
Yeah, I don't think Downs has had a fair crack of the whip. I think he should be kept on for next season, and let's give him some more game time, see what he's about. But like I said, I'm going to leave it there, chaps. Really appreciate you both being on. It's been a very interesting discussion, and obviously open invitation to you both for next Friday night if you're free to come on. Hopefully, we'll be able to talk about some new signings.
Yeah,
we fucking better be. We need to get moving. But look, I really appreciate you. I know it's kind of quite a late show on a Friday night, and so I appreciate yourselves making yourselves available for me. Obviously, as well, everyone in the live chat, really appreciate you every week for joining me as well. It means a lot to me, and as always, I hope you'll come and join me again next week. And we might be feeling a bit more upbeat if we've got some talented players in the door. Fingers crossed. But until then.